Welcome back to the 7th and final part of this definitive laser series. In this part we're going to be going over a fix of something that I messed up concerning the laser bounce, and also I'm going to be adding some little tweaks to the functionality, and at the end I'm going to be making a kind of completely different actor than the system here, and that is going to be creating, for instance, a gun that uses this laser system as well. And one of the extra functionality is going to be useful for that. So let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fix the bounce. Now, you're probably thinking, well, the bounce seems to work just fine, but there's actually a little issue with it. And it's not immediately apparent if you do the previous tests we made, but one of the systems we made, so I'm just going to pull it up here and put it on the scene, is that we made it so that we can lock a object here with, for instance, some conditions. So we can tell our handler to only, for instance, take into account some rules and some filters. And we can also do that on our reflect. So our handler here can say, well, it only works if it has two lasers hitting, otherwise it won't do anything. But the problem with that, and how our laser or our bounce works, is that it doesn't know what to activate in that situation. So I will show you how it works here just to quickly explain it. So let's just make this a bit bigger. And we're going to put two lasers that are going to hit this. So I'm going to just duplicate this by holding Alt and dragging. And there we go. So here we have two, and they will bounce just fine, no problem. So this works. If we block it, that doesn't disappear. The reason that doesn't disappear, and that's another issue we have here, is because it's still being hit over there. So it assumes that it can still be active. So that's also something we're going to have to fix. But the main thing we want to check, or the main issue that isn't as evident as that one, is right here if we tell it to the rule that it needs two lasers to work. Now here, it should have two bounces. The reason the first one wasn't there is part of the issue, is because it couldn't activate once the first one hit, but once the second one hit, the second one activated, but the first one didn't. And that's the issue. So here, for instance, if we block this, it only stops the first one. And it should also stop the second one. But for instance, it normally should handle that, or at least you would want it to handle that correctly. So that's what we're going to be setting up today. And it's going to need a few tweaks to get that to work. All of those tweaks are going to be in the same location, and that location is going to be in our AC handler. So open up our building blocks here, open up our AC handler, and the thing we need to change is this right here. Because what's happening is it is going through our components and saying, well, activate those components based on the new laser that just hit. But in the case of the bounce, we need to do that for every laser that is hitting. That is what our filtered lasers are for. Now, we are missing one thing for this to work, and I'm not sure if I made it before, so I'm going to remake it now. It's rather simple. But inside of our A laser here, because when a laser hits here, as we did right here, I believe, so when a laser is spawned, we save that information. So handle hit actors right here saves the information of this, so our hitting handlers. So we know what handler is taking into account what hit results. And so with that information, we can actually redo this as many times as we need, because we know the laser and we can then handle what information to pass through. So to do that, we actually need a function, and I've already made this function, but I'm not sure if I did it or removed it in the previous parts. So I'm just going to remake it from scratch. So I'm just going to delete all of this and make it blank. So call this function get hit by handler. Pretty much all this is for, we're going to get our hitting handlers here. So drag and control to have a get. And all we're going to do is we're going to call find. And this is pretty much just a function so that we can access this from outside. So we're going to plug in our actor or our laser or a handler, sorry, that we're looking for here into the input. And for the output, we want to know what the hit result is and if we actually found it. Because if we didn't find it, we can't use it. So this is all we need here. We can compile and save and make sure, that you put this to a pure cast. Easier to manage that way. So close a laser, don't need it anymore. Now, so what we're going to do, and this is going to be the case for both this, and also our special ones designed for the external interaction. We need to change all of these. So to do that, we're going to make a new macro, because that will make things a bit easier, because we do need both this as well inside of that macro. So on the plus here, we'll make our new macro. And so what we'll call this macro is for each we'll call this for each laser, because that's what we're going to be doing. The first thing we're going to go through is we're going to for each loop through our filtered lasers, because these are the lasers that are currently hitting that we want to take into consideration. So we're going to loop through these by plugging execute right there. And what we need to check for is we need to check, does this laser, so right here, can we get the handler? So we're going to say get handler, the function that we just made, get hit by handler. And so now the key that we're looking for is self, because we're looking for the handler of this laser. So what lasers are being hit, or sorry, what lasers are hitting this handler that is going to be activated, and tell that to activate on each component. Because now we have, for instance, for our self, let's say here, and we say activate our, I believe, no, sorry, not activate. We call start hitting, for instance. We know the input, and now we have the value. So we're going to move this a bit down. And so this is not going to be done here because we're going to do it like we did the previous one as well. And so this is not necessary, but what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, is the return value true? So that means we do have it. We do have something we've hit. And if that's the case, very simply, for each component, so pretty much like we had outside, but this time it's more detailed because it also goes through the loop of each laser. So now we want to get a reroute of this, and a reroute of this, and a reroute of this. Or actually, we don't need to do that one. So what we're going to do is loop body will go here. We want the array element. Then we want to get our laser, which we're going to plug in here as well. We'll add a reroute. And finally, we will add our value here as well, and another reroute just to make it more readable. And finally, we want one last thing, and that is the completed. Now, we don't want this completed, we want this completed once the whole thing is done. So we'll add another reroute just to bring it around, and we can rename these to array element. Output pin will change to laser. Hit result will change to hit result. And the last one will be called completed loops, or just completed works fine as well. So compile and save, we can close for each laser. And now let's go through which parts we put it on. So here we have event laser start hitting. So we're going to go all the way to the end, right here, and we're going to use it simply to replace this for each loop. So right here, we want to grab our for each loop here. Sorry, not that one. We want to grab our for each laser, and we want to plug in our loop body here. Our target is the array element, our laser is the input, and our hit result is the hit info. And we no longer need this because now we're using the laser storage itself to let the components know what is actually getting hit. So we can remove that and remove this and just plug that directly there. And so now we can delete this, just move this down, make sure on completed we call activate as well. And on true, we call this whole system. And obviously make sure you reattach the timer finished or this won't work. Now we want to do the same thing here. So we're going to copy this. We'll just plug it into this event. We'll plug the true here as well. Plug the loop body here, the array element here, and this time we just need the laser as well. So no problem, plug that here. And obviously on finish, we'll do this as well. Now I'm not sure if this will work. I believe, so just a heads up in case. I can't remember exactly, but this might not work directly. You might need to also add the previous code. So you might need to get a for each component as well and call it this way as well. Now I'm not 100% sure about that. So if you have any issues with the deactivation, try adding this here as well. So for now, I'll do without. If it seems to work, I'll leave it off. But in the event you do have an issue, try connecting this as well. Now, we need to also do this, obviously, for our extra ones at the bottom here. Yeah, so obviously for our extra ones here at the bottom as well, we need to do the exact same thing. So we're going to move this a bit to the side. We're going to say for each laser here. Although we can use it, it's also technically a bit overkill, because if we force activation, we already want to tell it to activate no matter what. So that means we use this. But at the same time, and this is why I'm hesitating a bit to put this here, is if we use this and we try and force activation on, for instance, a bounce wall, then it won't have anything to do, or it won't know what to do. Because technically, this can only really work for a emitter. Because if we try and activate a bounce and there's nothing on it, this is useless. But at the same time, if we try and force activate a bounce with a laser hitting it, it won't know what to do. So the best thing to do is to put both of these. We could do with a cast to see if it does have the... So what we could do maybe, yeah, is we will say get owner. And if the owner has the handler, the component, sorry, for bounce, so we're going to say get component by class right here. And we're going to look for our AC bounce. And so just detach this for a second, move this back here as well. And so if this is valid, so is valid we'll use right here, then we want to make sure that we also perform it this way by telling it to start hitting laser, or laser start hitting, and put this information in. And then we want to call our end loop here, but also if this is not valid, we also want to do it directly. And so this should allow us to ensure that even if it is a bounce, it does work if there are some lasers hitting. Otherwise it won't, obviously, because it won't be able to go through the loop. So I'm just going to move that a bit here. And so we'll do the same thing. So copy this, and we'll put this also at the bottom here, and put the deactivate at the end as well. Reroute, plug that in here. And instead of obviously start here, it's going to be stop hitting. And so we just need to get the laser input this time. And we will move this a bit up as well. So this should, if all goes well, solve the issue we were just facing. So if we now play, both of them activate. But if I block one, so as I did mention previously, we do actually need this system to be added. Sorry, not this system, this one right here. And the reason we do actually need this is because the instant our let's just pull it up here. The instant our laser here stops hitting is when it lets it know to stop hitting. But at the same time, it's already removed that element from the array and from the map, sorry. So that means it isn't actually capable of finding the laser we removed here. So that means it's telling it, oh, well, that laser doesn't exist, so we don't cancel it. But we know here in our for each component that the laser getting cancelled here, getting removed, still needs to be removed. So we actually add it here to make sure that we remove that specific input on all of our components, which is how this right here works correctly and disables both of the lasers. So, and normally, if everything still works, everything else is still deactivating here. If I block the white, those three go off. So the system still works exactly the same with only that minor little change. It still works. It's just that now we can also take into account things like the bouncing wall with conditions. Another quick change I also wanted to make, and this is very easy, is we're going to make a change here. And we're going to change this response so that we can tell our component to handle, instead of IsBlocking, we'll just tell it that it can also be ignored entirely. And the reason we're going to do that is for the next system, which is we're going to set up for instance, something completely unrelated to basically mostly puzzles, is we're going to make it so that you can shoot the targets, for instance, with a gun that spawns a laser. But for that to work, we need to make something here as well. So right here, instead of new response where we previously had this, we're going to delete it. We're going to create, actually no, we're not going to create, we're going to go into conditions. We're going to change IsBlocking's type to a response, and we're looking for e-collision response. And so this will now be able to be placed here. And instead of just saying IsBlocking, we will change it to collision response. We'll just call it that. There we go. So by default, we're going to leave this as block. And so that means any object that's hit will now be blocking, but we can also tell it to ignore by default. So now if let's say we ignore, nothing should get called normally, I believe. For some reason, it's not working though. So the reason is because by default, these actors aren't specifically taking that into consideration. So if we just, for instance, change our reflect here, go into our AC handler, and we will tell it to ignore. So that means the laser will go straight through it without asking any questions, without activating it. There we go. Because here, for instance, it's overlapping. So that means it's going through, it's triggering, and it's also passing through it. So it does work. So now we have a system where we can actually tell it to ignore as well. So with that, we can now make our new extra thing here. So let's move on to the next step, and that is making our gun, so to speak. So I would do this with, for instance, let's say the gun you pick up here, the player character or the first person character's gun. But the reason we can't use this is because the whole system relies on actor components. And this right here is a component that is just attached to the player. So because it's a component, it can't itself have components as well. So for this system to work with, or for at least for a gun to work with our system, we can't have it be a component, we need it to be an actor. So that's why this won't work. So we're going to make it a bit differently. So for it to work, we're going to need to make a new actor. So we're going to go here, blueprint class actor. We're going to say a underscore laser gun. And so we'll pull that up. And inside of it, let's just get our laser, a skeletal mesh right here. And the skeletal mesh will just use the gun, same thing. And with it, we need to add our system. So we're going to add our handler here. And the main thing we want to do, and this is absolutely crucial here, is we want to make sure we tell it to ignore any collisions. And the reason we tell it to ignore conditions is because otherwise, if it gets hit by a laser in your game, it will activate itself. And we don't want that. We want it specifically to be handled by external systems. So for this, we're also going to add our emitter, or our SC emitter, and we're going to attach it to the skeletal mesh, and I believe it has a socket that would be best used for this, but I don't know if we can. There we go. So we want to look for our, I believe, muzzle will be good. There we go. So that should work. Now what we can do, just to test this out first, we're going to invert the system. So it will activate by itself. The color will tell it to override, so it will be this purple. And now we can just drag it into the scene. And if we play, it should be emitting purple. There we go. The player can block it as well. And so we have our laser that shoots. All we need to do now is change a few little things just so that the character can actually use it. So we're going to make it so that the player can equip it. So to do that, we need to go into our content, our first person this time, blueprints, and we're going to make some modifications to the first person character. Now normally we'd make a child of this, but for now, we'll just deal with this. So what we're going to do is currently, actually, we won't make our changes here. We'll make our changes here. And so to do that, what we need is pretty much currently right here, this is the pickup gun system. This is how we make the player pick up the gun. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to change how it works, at least for us. So we're going to copy this information here, both of these. We're going to paste it here. Sorry, not copy. We need to drag it off because we need this to be, there can only be one of the events, obviously. So with this, the main things we want to do is to make sure that we let the player know to change its animations and all of that, so that we can do that at the very least. So what we need to do is we need to say, save this to our first person character, or actually we don't need that particularly, I don't think, but we will follow along with this system here. So I think we can just copy this, but we don't want to copy this because that's not necessary. That is based on previous system that needs to attach a component. We want to create an actor. So right here, plug this in. Then we are going to attach this to our child reference. And we will then say on completed, destroy actor. So now if we run this system, so this will work with our thing here. If we go and pick it up, it will just disappear. Before it used to equip something in the player's hands. Now it doesn't do that. In our first person blueprints, once again, we should have our weapon component here. So BP weapon component. And so on begin play, this is what we want to handle differently. So we want to do pretty much everything that's here. We want to do the same thing, but in our laser gun. So we're going to copy this over, all of it, even though it's not correct. We're going to copy it. We're going to remove all this, paste. Now, some of this won't work, so we're just going to have to re-put here our begin play. Plug the begin play into here. This right now we don't use, but we're going to set it up in a second. This we want to keep, so right click, create our variable. Instead of this, we're not going to attach actor to components because this isn't a component. Sorry, no, so this should work. Sorry. So if we compile, we're going to get a few errors. This we want to keep, but I don't know. We can't keep this because it won't work because this isn't the first person character, or at least this isn't the first person character. So this is important. This we want to make sure we keep because that's what's going to change the animation. So we're going to get rid of this here because that's the input system that we don't need. Or actually, we will copy this and it's going to go in the first person here. So paste this information here in the first person for now. Remove this and we're just going to plug this into here. So right now this won't do anything, at least not functionally. It will look good, at least how it should. Here we're getting some errors. We're just going to disconnect that for now. And what we want to do is our AC handler here. We are going to get our first person here. And I believe, no, sorry, not our first person. We want to go into our pickup here. We can close our BP component, by the way, we don't need it. In our pickup here, we need to say destroy actor, we want to remove it. And we're going to say spawn actor from class. And the spawn actor is going to be our BP, not our BP first person, our A laser gun. And we're going to have an error because we don't have our spawn transform. We're going to split this. We're going to destroy actor. Now, one of the problems we have here is our A laser gun uses our get owner, but it doesn't specifically have an owner. So what we can do instead is we can say get instigator. Or actually, no, it can have an owner. Sorry, I got that wrong. So I want to go and re-put that here. Get owner, it works fine. We're going to get our BP rifle here. And our owner going to say the first person character, or our first person character reference, the one right here. So the owner, and now normally if we compile and play, if we go and pick up the gun, it should have the same effect as previously. There we go. So the animations are all there, but we can't shoot because that's not set up yet. So the next thing we need is to tell it when we shoot, activate. So to do that, we're going to go into our first person character. And right here, instead of, or we will be needing this, sorry. So to get this to work, we need our begin play. And in our begin play, we're going to attach it to the executable. And here we need to get player controller. And we could also use the get local controller of this actor, would work as well. So now if we add our shoot input action, on triggered, if we print right here, we should get that we can actually shoot. Now, we could turn this into an actual proper thing where it actually will, how to put it, where in addition to this, it could only do it when we pick up a gun, but we're not going to bother doing that here. So we'll just add simply another condition to check that it's not an issue. What we're going to do here is we're going to add our external, because our external allows us to control it. So to control it, we want to make sure we invert control. We don't want to use the conditions. We don't care. We just want to shoot. No problem there. So we can compile this. And so for the necessary actor, what we need to do is upon connecting here, so all of this works just fine. All of this works as well. What we need to do is we'll just add a sequence here to make it more readable. We're going to add a sequence, plug the first element into then 0, and from the sequence, what we're going to do, just to test, we're going to get our first person character, we're going to get our external component, so get external here, and we're just going to print to see if it exists. Just like that. There we go. That's all, nothing too complicated. Print that when we pick it up, we do have the external. So it exists. So with the external, we've already set up the system previously so that we can actually use it. So all we need to do is normally we would tell the external actor, so for instance like our door here, that it needs to know these two actors. So it needs to know of these ones. So right now we can't do that because we're spawning the actor. It doesn't know. So when we spawn the actor, we need to let our external actor know what it's to attach to, what it needs to take into account. So here we're going to look for, I believe it's called connected, did we call it? Or was it something else? Target, sorry, target actors. So target actors, we're going to add self. So right here, plug it in, say self, and there we go. So now it knows that this actor is connected. That's the one it needs to take into account. That's the one that will be activated or deactivated based on the inputs. So right here, we still can't do anything, obviously, because we haven't told the player what to do. So here, what we're going to do from our AC external, and this is probably a function we should make, but it's okay. For now, we're going to say get target actors, and we're going to say is not empty. If it's not empty, we can actually do something. So on triggered branch, we'll put here. And so just so you know, what we're going to do is on triggered, we'll say print, start. And we're also going to do on completed, stop. And so that should normally mean if we left click, starts, and then it immediately stops because it's triggered on the actual click itself, not on holding or anything like that. So on stop, we will tell it to deactivate, whereas on start, we will tell it to activate. So we're going to do the same thing here on completed. And all we're going to call from here is our start. Sorry, not our start. I believe it is called... Let me just double check so I get the function correctly. Blueprints, we're going to look for our external. And we want to call activate this and deactivate this, if I remember correctly. We're just going to check our button because that's what it is. So activate this and deactivate this is what we want. So on our first person, on true, we'll call from our AC external, activate this. And the instigator doesn't matter, it's not important. And on the bottom, deactivate this right here. So true. So by default, this isn't going to do anything because we don't have the gun, but if we have it equipped, it should activate and deactivate our laser normally. It doesn't seem to be doing that. So let's try and figure out why. So not the handler, we want to see the first person. I want to see if this is getting called first. So if we go and shoot, nothing happens. If we pick up the gun, it says hello, so it should be allowed to shoot. I'm going to check it and actually pay attention if we actually get any new actors. Okay, so we're not getting any new actors either. So that means that it's not actually spawning the laser, so to speak. So this is just actually, I'm going to check something because I think it might be working. But the reason it is not is because of how we set this up. So I'm actually going to change something here. So normally we do it on triggered, but what we're going to do instead is I'm going to change how our IA shoot works. So double click on it. We're going to remove the trigger from pressed. So the reason we're doing this is because otherwise the laser is appearing for a frame and we don't actually get to see it. So that could be why we're not seeing anything here. So let's go back into our first person. And instead of triggered, we're going to use on started, we will activate it. And on completed, meaning released or cancelled, same thing as well, we will stop. So let's try that. And this might work, whereas it previously wasn't. So no, so it's still not working. It's still not making any lasers. Let's try and figure out why that is. Okay, so I think this is the reason. So inside of our AC external, the reason is because on begin play, it does this, but that is not enough here because it's calling this before and it's inverting controls, but we don't have any target actors yet. So instead, what we'll do is we will call this as a function here. We'll say, turn this into a custom event, and this will be link delegates, we'll call it. And so by default, this will be called on begin play. But we can also make it so it's only called on begin play if this isn't empty. So is not empty branch. If it isn't empty, we'll call true. If it is empty, then we don't do anything because there's no point. There's nothing to actually determine at all. So just move this a bit down here just to organize it. There we go. Move this across. And so now we should have the system work as long as we tell it to link the delegates. So in our LaserGun here, once we connect this, we need to tell our handle or external handle here to link the delegates. So then it will know which functions to call in which handles. And this should, and this should fix the problem. So if we left click, so now we are getting the laser. And the laser is visible here, but I don't think we can see it. So it's like visually there, but there seems to be something wrong. Because as you can see, if I release, we go down to 79. If I hold, it goes back to 80. So it is there, but something is wrong. So it's not visible. So I'm going to see, oh, I think I might know why. I think it's hitting itself, but I'm not 100% sure. So what we'll do is we will remove the deactivate just so we can see what it looks like. So let's pick up the gun again and shoot. Now if we F8, it should be there. So if we look at our gun here, we have a laser, and the laser is there, but for some reason it is not doing anything. I believe it's because it is hitting the player. I think that is the issue here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make sure our capsule collision here is set to ignore. So I'm just going to change it from pawn to custom, tell it to ignore the laser. We're going to do the same thing for the player mesh as well, just in case. So once again, custom, laser, ignore. And now if we play, that should fix the issue, I believe. I'm not 100% sure again. There we go. So now the laser is actually shooting non-stop. And it will bounce normally if we hit here, but we've told it to ignore, so it doesn't care. And let's see again. So if we go to first person and we re-put our cancelled / completed, it should be able to connect now. So I believe it's activated by default. The reason is because we put our emitter to be inverted. If we look at our AC handler, it's inverted by default when it should be. It should just be based on whether the player clicks. So right now, there we go, it's off. If we click, it turns on. And there we go. So there we go. So that does it. Now let's just check if it's working, for instance, with our bounce here, because by default we put our AC bounce to not be working correctly. So we'll just open that up and set the handler back to block. And so we can also just actually, if we don't need this anymore, we can, there are no conditions. Let's just remove the conditions from here as well. So handler, remove the conditions. And so now it bounces immediately. Let's add another one. If we shoot, it bounces as well, and it updates as we move. There we go. Now, obviously, it's a bit slow. It's not as fast as, for instance, the lasers, because lasers aren't moving. But it does seem to be working, although it doesn't remember to delete them. So let's have a quick look at why that is. So what we're going to do here is we are going to call component change color, but also that this laser here has stopped hitting. And the reason for that is because this laser has specifically stopped hitting. We don't need to go through all that. We just need to tell it that that specific laser is gone, because it is. So right here, the same thing was occurring if we blocked this. Now that should be resolved as well. Or not. It still is there. That's not right. It should be going away. I think the issue also once again lies in our can spawn laser. So because right here it's going in and it's saying that it can still activate. So what we need is we need to add this, because this is what's getting caught here. So if we print this, sorry, let's do that again. If we print this, it's going to say, yep, that's exactly what it's doing. It's going here, but it's not actually valid, so to speak. The reason it's not valid is because this input right here doesn't exist anymore. So what we can do is we can say here, does this contain the input, or, so sorry, does not contain the input, so not boolean here. If it does not contain the boolean, or it can not spawn, oh sorry, actually this is much easier, just do this, and then not instead at the end. If either of these are the case, then we should stop it. So right here, let's try that again. It all works. If we block it, it disappears. And if we let it go again, it restarts. Let's try it again one more time. Same thing, it blocks. And let's try now with the gun. It should also work as well. Yeah, so if we leave it for, if we do it very quickly, it disappears as well, no problem. And there as well, no problem at all. It's working just fine. Now, this is still obviously overlapping. That's why it looks like this. But it does seem to be working. And if, for instance, we hit this, it doesn't matter. It's not doing anything. If we hit that, it's already activated. No problem as well. If we hit a normal wall, it will be blocked normally. Can't really tell because it's kind of going through it. But that seems to be working as intended. Fixed the issues that were causing it. And so seems to be an issue here with this because it's getting hit by an extra laser. Why is that? I think I know what the issue is here. So because we just changed how the system works, we've just told it if the laser that gets disconnected is no longer hitting it, then it should be disabled, but that's not true. Because here, it's still getting hit, so it should still be able to activate. I believe what we should be doing here, and I think so, I'm going to go back to our emitter and we're going to remove all of this. Not all of it, just this here. We're going to put it back to how it was before. And instead of doing that, what we're going to do is in our AC bounce, instead of stop hitting, we're simply going to say override. Sorry, not override. We called it force deactivation right here. Not that one, sorry. Force deactivation from our core function here. So force deactivation. We don't care about the conditions, we just want to deactivate it. And so that should have the same effect without breaking the rest. So there we go. So it did stop, hits again, blocks again, no problem. If we get this and shoot it, works fine. If we let go, it disappears. If we shoot this, it still stays activated. If we release, it stays activated as well because it knows that laser is hitting. And the same thing here for these as well, no problem. And I believe now it is working. So one last check we can do is just reactivate the conditions here to make sure that it is working perfectly fine. So we're going to add condition that needs to be hit by 3 lasers this time. And so now both of them are hitting, nothing's working. But if we hit it with this laser, it will activate both of them. And if we release it, deactivates both of them because they can't work without 3. There we go. So that's working just fine. Oh, so that seems to be a little bit of an issue. How come that? So we have a little bit of an issue here. So this isn't visible because of how our lasers spawn, they don't move. But here we're going off of it and hitting nothing. And so I think the problem is, or apparently no. So let me just test that one last time just to check. It seems that it's a bug. We need to fix that. So here we go off, it stops working. If I release, it deactivates it, so it knows. But if I go off, it shouldn't still be doing that. So there is an issue. Let's try and figure out what that issue is as well. Okay, so the reason is because right here, the current, what we want to do is we want to make sure we tell it that our current handlers, so what we're currently hitting, is empty if this happens. So what we'll say is we will grab our current handlers, we will say clear right here, or I don't believe it is even necessary because we clear them right here. So if this happens, we still want to call this. We still want to make sure we deactivate anything because nothing is getting hit. So that's what we'll do right here. So that should fix our issue. Let's try again. And so now if we hit it with this, it should deactivate. There we go. So that fix it. There we go. So a very quick fix by simply adding our update length to the end here so that it also checks and deactivates when it's no longer hitting. So with that done, I believe that is everything, and even an extra little thing to show how this system can work. I hope you enjoyed the series as a whole. Now, when this episode comes out, all the project files should be available on Patreon, so I hope you check those out if you are interested in that. I do want to shout out everybody who has been supporting me on Patreon. Thank you so much for the support. And I will see you all in the next project. It might be a bit delayed due to the technical issues I had previously, which delayed this whole project and kind of everything else. But I will see you then. Goodbye.